Clara had always been the woman who kept herself composed. She managed her home, her work, and her marriage with quiet determination. But that particular Friday evening, everything felt heavier than usual. Work had drained her. The constant demands, the sharp words of her boss, the endless deadlines had left her shoulders tight and her heart tired. She came home, slipped off her heels, and dropped her bag by the door, already knowing she had nothing left to give. The house was silent, as it often was. Daniel, her husband, was away again on business, a trip that seemed to stretch longer every time he left. Clara told herself she was used to it, but the truth was harder. She was lonely. The walls of the large home felt more like barriers than comfort. She had thought marriage would mean companionship. Someone to share the evenings with, someone to laugh with after a long day. Instead, it was often just her, moving from room to room with the echo of her own footsteps. She went to the kitchen and reached for the bottle of wine. Sitting on the counter, at first, it was only meant to be one glass, something to smooth out the rough edges of her day. She poured it, sat on the couch, and tried to relax. The first sip burned in a comforting way, like warmth running through her chest. She told herself it was fine. Just one. But one became another, and then another. Each glass blurred the sharpness of her thoughts. But it also stirred something else, a deep ache she couldn't silence. The television was on, though she wasn't watching. Her eyes drifted to the pictures on the wall, smiling family photos, frozen moments of happiness. One picture showed her, Daniel and Ethan, from 2 summers ago, smiling by the lake. Clara's lips curved in a faint smile, but it faded as quickly as it came. She hadn't realized until then how much had changed. Ethan had grown into a young man, away at college most of the year, and Daniel had buried himself in work. Clara was left with the quiet, and tonight it weighed on her like never before. The room spun slightly as she leaned back on the couch, glass still in hand. She hated this feeling, this vulnerability. She wanted to be strong, graceful, the woman everyone believed her to be. But inside, she was breaking in small, silent ways. The sound of the front door startled her. For a moment, her heart leapt. Maybe Daniel had come home early, surprising her the way he used to. But when she looked up, it wasn't Daniel standing there. It was Ethan. He stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, his dark hair messy from travel. A backpack hung from one arm, and his expression shifted the moment he saw her. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by concern. Clara. His voice carried hesitation, gentle but firm. Clara tried to sit up straighter, forcing a smile that didn't quite land. Ethan. "You're home early," she murmured, her words slightly uneven. Ethan set his bag down slowly, his eyes never leaving her. He walked toward the couch, his movements careful, almost cautious, as though he didn't want to startle her. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, glancing at the half-empty bottle on the table. Clara's cheeks burned with embarrassment. She wanted to brush it off, to laugh and tell him it was nothing, but the truth was too obvious. "Just a long day," she whispered, lowering her eyes. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down on the edge of the couch, close enough that she could feel the steadiness of his presence. He reached for the glass still in her hand and set it gently on the table. "You don't look fine," he said, his tone calm but full of care. Clara felt exposed more than she ever had before. Ethan had always known her as the steady figure in his life, the woman who tried to hold the family together when Daniel was away. To be seen like this, tired, undone, vulnerable, was almost unbearable. Yet when she looked at Ethan, she didn't see judgment. She saw something softer, something that unsettled her even more. "I'm sorry you had to see me like this," Clara whispered. Her voice cracked, the words barely holding together. "You don't have to apologize," Ethan replied quickly. "Everyone has bad days." His gaze lingered on her, steady and kind. And Clara felt something stir inside her chest. For a moment, silence filled the room. The only sound was the faint hum of the television. Clara's eyes met Ethan's, and in that brief connection, something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't loud or obvious, but it was there in understanding. A shift she couldn't quite explain. Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice low, "You don't have to go through this alone, Clara." The words echoed in her mind. Simple, yet powerful. For so long, she had carried the weight of her loneliness quietly, never admitting how deeply it cut. To hear those words from him, so honest, so unexpected, made her chest tighten. Clara swallowed hard, her heart racing in ways she hadn't felt in years. She knew Ethan was only trying to comfort her, to show kindness. But something about the way he looked at her, steady and unwavering, made her feel both seen and vulnerable. In that instant, everything changed. Ethan sat quietly beside Clara, his hand resting on his knees, his eyes steady. The room felt smaller with him there, the silence pressing against both of them. Clara shifted uncomfortably, pulling a cushion closer to her chest, as if it might shield her from the weight of his gaze. She wanted to speak, to explain, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. "You've always been strong. I've never seen you like this." His voice wasn't accusing. It was gentle, filled with a kind of concern that felt almost too personal. Clara exhaled slowly. "Sometimes I pretend I'm stronger than I really am." The truth slipped out before she could stop it. She turned her face away, staring at the framed photographs on the wall. Anything to avoid his eyes. Ethan leaned back, his shoulders relaxing as if he had been waiting for her to say something real. "You don't have to pretend with me." The words landed deep inside her, unsettling her more than she expected. Daniel had never said that. Her husband's way of loving her was different, distant, practical, reliable. He provided, he cared in his own way, but he didn't notice when she was unraveling. Ethan, however, had walked in once and already seen through her carefully built mask. She shook her head, almost laughing, though there was no humor in it. "You're too young to understand," Ethan frowned. "Age doesn't change loneliness." Clara looked at him then, really looked. His eyes were intense, steady, the kind of eyes that held on to you and didn't let go. She felt a pang of guilt, but also a spark of something she hadn't felt in years, being understood. Her voice trembled when she spoke again. "It's hard. Always waiting, always pretending it doesn't hurt when your husband leaves again. Sometimes the house feels like a stranger's place. It's not a home." She bit her lip, realizing how much she had just confessed. Ethan didn't flinch. He sat closer, not too close, but enough that she could feel the warmth of his presence. "You don't deserve to feel invisible." His tone was firm, protective, and it made her chest tighten. Clara's throat ached as emotions rushed forward. She wanted to tell him to stop, to walk away before the air between them grew heavier, but she couldn't. For the first time in years, she felt truly heard. "Ethan, you shouldn't say things like that," she whispered, though her heart betrayed her with every rapid beat. "I mean it," he replied softly, his voice steady but low. "You've always been the one holding everything together. No one sees how much you give." "I see it." Her breath caught. She wanted to dismiss his words, but the sincerity in his eyes left her defenseless. She had longed for someone to notice, to acknowledge the quiet sacrifices she made every day. Hearing it from him was dangerous, yet it felt like a lifeline she couldn't let go of. The clock ticked in the background, each second stretching longer than it should. Clara shifted on the couch, wrapping her arms around herself. "I shouldn't be telling you these things. I'm your stepmother." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "And I'm not a kid anymore." His voice was calm, but there was an edge beneath it, something he wasn't saying aloud. The room seemed to grow warmer. The air, heavy with words, neither of them dared to speak. Clara tried to steady herself, reminding her heart of the boundaries she could never cross. Still, the way Ethan looked at her made those boundaries blur. Her hands trembled slightly, and Ethan noticed. Without thinking, he reached out and covered her hand with his. His touch was firm yet careful, as though he didn't want to scare her away. Clara's breath hitched, her pulse racing. She should have pulled back. She didn't. "Ethan." Her voice cracked, filled with warning and longing all at once. "I just don't want you to feel alone," he said, his eyes locked on hers. It was too much. The tenderness in his gaze, the honesty in his tone, it broke through every wall she had built. Clara turned her face away, blinking back the sting in her eyes. You don't understand how complicated this is. I do, Ethan replied quietly. More than you think. For a moment, silence consumed them again. The television flickered in the background, forgotten. Clara could feel her heart pounding, the heat in her chest spreading like wildfire. She knew this conversation had already gone too far, that she was treading a dangerous line. Yet deep inside, a part of her didn't want it to stop. She stood quickly, breaking the closeness. I should. Get some water, she muttered, moving toward the kitchen. Her hands shook as she reached for a glass, her reflection in the window staring back at her, pale and shaken. She tried to steady her breathing, but the weight of Ethan's words clung to her. He followed. The following days passed slowly, each one carrying a new weight Clara could not shake. Every time she entered a room, she noticed Ethan's presence in ways she never had before. He moved through the house with quiet confidence. No longer the boy she remembered, but a man who carried himself with calm strength. That awareness unsettled her. It pulled at her heart and left her restless at night. Clara tried to convince herself that nothing had changed, that their conversation had been a moment of weakness fueled by her exhaustion. Yet she caught herself glancing at him when he wasn't looking. She noticed the way he listened when she spoke, the way his smile softened when their eyes met. She reminded herself over and over she was his stepmother, married to his father. But feelings didn't follow rules. And each passing day blurred the line she had drawn. One evening, the house felt unusually quiet. Daniel was still away on another trip, and the silence pressed down on Clara like a heavy blanket. She stepped outside onto the porch, needing air, the cool night breeze brushing against her skin. She wrapped a cardigan around her shoulders and stared at the stars, wishing for clarity she couldn't find. The sound of the sliding door opening behind her made her heart skip. Ethan stepped out, carrying 2 steaming mugs. I thought you might like some tea, he said softly, offering her one. His voice held no pressure, only a quiet kindness. Clara accepted the cup, her fingers brushing his for the briefest second. Even that touch sent a ripple through her. Thank you, she whispered, her voice unsteady. They sat side by side on the porch steps, the glow from the kitchen light falling across them. For a long moment, they said nothing. The night was filled with crickets and the distant hum of cars on the road. It should have been peaceful, but Clara's chest was tight. You don't have to take care of me, Ethan, she finally said, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her cup. Maybe I want to, he replied. His words were gentle but firm, spoken with a certainty that caught her off guard. Clara turned her head to look at him, and for the first time, she allowed herself to really see him, not as Daniel's son, not as the boy she had once helped with homework, but as a man, sitting beside her, meeting her gaze without flinching. The thought frightened her, and yet it also filled her with a strange, aching warmth. This isn't right, she whispered. Almost to herself, Ethan's jaw tightened, though his eyes never left hers. I know, but that doesn't mean I don't feel it. Her breath caught in her throat. She should have stopped him then, drawn the line firmly, shut the door to whatever was growing between them. But she didn't. She couldn't. The honesty in his voice shook her more than anything. Clara looked away, her eyes stinging. Your father trusts me. I made vows to him. This can't happen. I'm not asking for anything, Ethan said quickly, his voice low. I just need you to know that you're not invisible. Someone sees you. I see you. The words cut through her like a knife. She had spent so long feeling unseen, living quietly in the shadows of her husband's busy life. Now, here was Ethan, looking at her as though she was the center of his world. It was dangerous, but it was intoxicating. Her hands trembled as she set the cup down on the step. She pressed her palms together, trying to steady herself. You don't understand how hard this is for me. Ethan leaned closer, not enough to touch, but close enough that she felt the warmth radiating from him. I understand more than you think, and I would never hurt you. Clara's chest rose and fell quickly, her heart racing. She believed him. That was the problem. She believed every word, and that made the temptation stronger. The silence stretched again, heavy with everything left unsaid. Clara tried to breathe, tried to push down the storm building inside her. She thought about Daniel, about the years she had stood by him. She thought about her vows, about the promises she had made. Yet even as she clung to those thoughts, her heart betrayed her. Pulling her closer to the young man sitting beside her, Ethan's hand brushed hers. So light she almost thought she imagined it, but it was real. She froze, her breath catching. His hand lingered, waiting for her to pull away. She didn't. She couldn't. Her voice broke the silence, shaky and uncertain. "Ethan, this is the line we can't cross." He nodded slowly, his hand still near hers. I know, but the way he said it made her wonder if knowing would ever be enough to stop what was happening between them. The night air felt charged, almost alive. Clara's heart pounded as she stared ahead, afraid to move, afraid to look at him again. She wanted to stand and walk inside, to put space between them. But her body stayed rooted to the step. For a long time, they sat there in silence, the tea growing cold in their cups. The only sound was the rhythm of their breathing, steady but uneven. As though both were fighting a battle neither could win. Finally, Clara stood abruptly, her legs trembling beneath her. "We should go inside," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. Ethan nodded, his expression unreadable. He picked up the cups and followed her inside, his presence close behind her. Clara could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing between them, heavier than ever. That night, when she lay in bed alone, she stared at the ceiling, her thoughts racing. She told herself she had done the right thing, that nothing had happened, that she had kept the line intact. But deep down, she knew the truth. Something had already shifted. Something had already broken. The porch, the tea. The touch of his hand, all of it lingered inside her, making her heart ache with a longing she couldn't confess. And as she closed her eyes, one truth echoed in her mind. The life she had built might not be strong enough to resist what was growing between them. Daniel returned home on a Tuesday evening, his suitcase rolling across the wooden floor, his voice carrying the same tired cheerfulness Clara had grown used to. "Clara, I'm back," he called. She greeted him with a smile, hugged him, and tried to hide the storm inside her. On the surface, life went back to normal meals at the table. Polite conversations about work, and quiet evenings with the television humming in the background. But nothing truly felt the same. Ethan was careful. Around his father, he kept his distance, polite but reserved. He didn't linger in the kitchen the way he used to, and he didn't sit close to Clara when they watched a movie. But every glance carried a weight that left her shaken. When their eyes met, even for a second, Clara felt her heart stumble. She told herself to stop, to shut it down, to erase that night on the porch, and the words that still echoed in her mind. But she couldn't. Some things, once spoken, couldn't be undone. Clara moved through her days with a kind of quiet tension. Daniel didn't notice his mind was full of meetings and phone calls, always preparing for the next trip. She cooked dinner, smiled when he thanked her, kissed his cheek when he left in the morning. Outwardly, nothing had changed. Inwardly, everything had. One evening, a week after Daniel's return, Clara walked into the kitchen to find Ethan leaning against the counter, scrolling through his phone. The moment he looked up, the air shifted. She froze, clutching the dish towel in her hands, her throat tightening. "Hey," he said softly. Just one word. Simple, ordinary. But the way he said it made her pulse quicken. "Hey," she replied, her voice low. She turned toward the sink, trying to busy herself with the dishes, but she could feel his eyes on her. The silence stretched, heavy and charged. Finally, she set the towel down and faced him. "You need to stop looking at me like that," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "I can't help it." Her breath caught. She wanted to be angry, to scold him, to remind him of the roles they were bound to. But the truth was, she didn't want him to stop. That was what terrified her most. Clara stepped back, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "This isn't fair," she said, her voice breaking. "I know," Ethan answered quickly, his voice full of restraint. "I'm not asking for anything. I can't pretend I don't feel it." Her chest ached at his honesty. She wanted to tell him to forget, to erase the words, to bury the feelings. But her heart betrayed her. "Neither can I," she admitted, the confession slipping out before she could stop it. Silence fell again, thicker than before. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, Clara knew something had shifted permanently. There was no way to go back to how things had been before that night. They had crossed into a place where every word, every glance, carried meaning. A sound from upstairs broke the moment. Daniel moving about. Calling for Clara, she jumped, her breath sharp, and stepped away from Ethan as if distance could erase what had just passed between them. He lowered his eyes, shoved his phone in his pocket, and walked out without another word. That night, Clara lay awake beside her husband, staring at the ceiling. Daniel slept soundly, unaware of the storm building around them. Clara's heart was heavy with guilt and longing, torn between the life she had built and the emotions she could no longer deny. She knew she hadn't betrayed him physically, but her heart told a different story. In the days that followed, Clara tried to avoid Ethan as much as she could. She busied herself with errands, phone calls, anything that kept her out of the house. Yet no matter how hard she tried, their paths crossed in the kitchen, on the porch. In the quiet hallways of the home they shared, every encounter was brief, but everyone left her breathless.